thanks everybody for being here. When we sent out marketing materials for this month's session, we asked you this question: could developing a single skill transform your leadership? And the answer to that question is probably yes. There are probably skills out there that can transform leadership, but I wonder if maybe there is a skill like that, and if there is, it probably is strategic communication. The idea of strategic communication. Now, when we talk about strategic communication, we're not really talking about one specific skill. We're talking about a particular set of skills, and them working together to kind of help us meet our goals. So we're going to talk about strategic communication today. We've got around an hour to do it, and an hour is not really going to be enough time. So we'll just kind of hit the surface level, and if you want to further engage, we can do that. But we're going to look for ways to leverage our regular everyday communications as tools that can be used to inspire, align, empower the people around us. It's kind of a tall order, though, because it's really difficult to make changes to things that are really well ingrained and habitual, right? And we all communicate all the time. So we have a style, we have a communication style, we have habits that are ingrained. And so to make changes to that is kind of a difficult thing to do. But we're going to give you a couple of things to think about today. We all do communication all the time, right? And we're good, right? We know how to do this, right? Our words are never misinterpreted. Our words are never used out of context, or they're never ignored, right? Well, maybe not. But anyway, that's what we're going to do. Now, I need to warn you that today's message will be recorded, and it will be distributed to the folks who have signed up for the session. So if you don't want to be seen on camera, just make sure your mic is muted, and you can even turn your camera off as far as I'm concerned, unless you have rules in your agency that require you to have them on. This is me. I'm Rick Murdock. I work with DHRM, the Leadership and Organizational Development Group. We do these off the shelves every month. And the reason I'm showing this slide is because of that email address there. If you'd like to further engage, jot down the email address. Ignore the Southern gentleman to the left on the slide. It was bad timing on my part getting the headshot scheduled for when it was scheduled. And so I was in the middle of I have 3 kids that like to perform. They roped me into doing a show with them where I had to look like that. So that's how it works out. So for at least the next little while, I'm a Southern gentleman. Next month, actually it's not next month, it's December 3rd. We usually do these the last Wednesday of the month. The last Wednesday of November is right before Thanksgiving, so we've moved it to December 3rd. Sydney Alton will be talking about recognition as retention, as a retention tool. Recognition is retention. Here's a quick blurb on what she'll be talking about. She wants to help us move beyond the sporadic annual awards and budget discussions to show why timely, meaningful employee recognition is the single most powerful yet underutilized tool that we possess for building unbreakable commitment. She's going to provide a measurable framework to embed recognition as a core leadership behavior that directly impacts the continuity and ultimate success of your agency's mission. Don't let your best talent walk out the door. So you'll get an opportunity to actually to sign up for that session before our session's over. It'll be in the chat. Shane will put it in there for you. You can sign up for that. We'll also send out an email as we get closer. One other thing I want to mention, we have a new program, a new tool, a new resource for you. It's called Fast Track to Leadership. It's short snippets, videos, 2 to 3 minutes long, that talk about leadership topics kind of in the micro format. So you can access that through the Employee Gateway. You'll find links to Fast Track. And we also have a direct address, fasttrackttoleadership.us. That's fancy. And then you can go to YouTube and look up LOD Utah, or even Instagram. Come connect with us on Instagram. We have some content there as well. So that's rolled out, and that's another resource for you. All right, let's define strategic communication here. The definition that I want to use here is the purposeful use of interactions to influence perceptions and behaviors of a defined audience in order to achieve specific goals. Some common frustrations that managers face with communication is miscommunication, right? And here you'll all recognize these examples. Emails that go unread, that's a miscommunication. That's also missed communication. Meetings that drag on and on without any clear outcome or any clear direction or plan for where we're headed after the meeting. Also, great ideas that just don't get any buy-in or traction. Those are misallocated time and money, and those are also missed opportunities, right? So communication isn't just a task. It's not just something to be checked off. It is a strategic tool. And our goal today is to find ways to shift our perspectives and create a framework for our interactions. We're going to refer to communication today as interactions because that's what it is. When we interact with others, we have opportunities to share information, to gather information, opportunities to build between each other. And so we'll look at that today. Strategy in government is like strategy anywhere. Strategy in business or government, they're basically the same thing. It's a long-term plan to achieve broad goals by defining a vision and outlining the methods to reach it. In other words, we're going to say, here's what we want, here's the steps that we're going to take to get there. That's strategy, right? In government, it involves setting priorities, allocating resources, creating policies, creating operational plans that address citizenry and community needs, long-term objectives like, for example, building a state that can be a place where people can be healthier, or building some infrastructure so entrepreneurialism can thrive, that kind of thing. Effective government strategy requires that we have foresight and that we're able to adapt to future trends and challenges. So if that's strategy, then strategic communication is finding ways to support and accomplish all of that through interacting with others. In other words, strategic communication is the purposeful use of communication to achieve specific organizational goals by developing and implementing plans across various channels. It includes understanding your audience, it includes crafting consistent messages, and it includes using communication tools including everyday interactions to influence perceptions and behaviors. That was long and boring. So let's move into what exactly we're trying to do here. Our agenda for today is we're going to look at purpose, like defining purpose. We're going to look at secondary purposes for any message that we put out there. We're going to show you a framework that you can use to kind of build a strategic communication plan. And then we'll look at some principles that can go into that framework. And then finally, we'll end with thinking about shifting mindsets, what mindsets we need to set in order to be strategic communicators just naturally. So let's dive into that. Let me show you just quickly as a kind of background, a quick little chart here. On the y-axis, we have outputs, and on the x-axis, we have time. And here's our task, right? This is our status quo task. The thing that we want. It's over time, it's more outputs or it's higher quality out. It doesn't really matter. It's something is growing in our outputs over time. Now, most of the time, as the energy tied up in systems starts to burn up, systems bend towards entropy. It looks like that, right? Our outputs start to drop off, and at some point, we kind of stop doing whatever the program is, or the process, or the system, or whatever it is. It's worth having a discussion about letting old programs die, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're actually going to talk about improvement and growth. And improvement and growth, if we want it to be consistent, usually looks something like this. It's on the margins, along the edge of what we think of as status quo. Now, how do we do that, though? Because all of our systems are naturally bending towards entropy. In order to keep them from bending towards entropy, we need some energy put back into the system, some effort. And a lot of times that effort ends up looking habitual, especially for those programs that need to die, that just keep going. It's habitual. That energy becomes habitual. We don't even think about it. We just do it. And we don't ask ourselves why. But for that marginal improvement, that takes a little bit more energy or effort and strategy. We have to look into the future, see what's out there, and then adjust intentionally and appropriately to kind of get that little bit of improvement. Pat McMillan, an author, a CEO, said, Excellent communication doesn't just happen naturally. It's a product of process, skill, climate, relationship, and hard work. So being a good communicator it's a skill set, but it's also just applying hard work. And we're going to look at some ways to do that. Hopefully we can make it fairly easy. Let's talk about purpose to start out with. To be efficient and effective with any communication, it's a really good idea to start with defining a purpose. What should the audience know, have, and do when they get this message? Essentially, we can articulate this by asking ourselves this question: why am I writing to or calling or scheduling time with this person or group? Why am I doing it? And the answer probably starts with, I want them to this, or I want them to know, or they need to know. And once we've filled in that blank, the thing that we want them to know or that they need to know, once we've filled that in, then we've set a scope for our message. And the scope is really helpful. It gives us a nice framework to work within. And it also gives us a stated purpose. We can use that when we answer that question. We can use that stated purpose as a topic sentence in our message, or as the framework for the hook, or whatever else. So let's think about it this way. We've basically, when we've done that, when we've set our purpose, we've laid out an explicit message. So we'll put that up here as our first layer. But what if there's more to it than that? What if no message is just its surface level, explicit level? What if all messages have layers? I think they do. Even the word explicit, right? The word explicit has layers, right? Depending on context. I thought twice about using that word in this presentation because I know it has another meaning that might raise eyebrows, right? The meaning that we're using for this specific presentation of the word explicit is stated clearly and in detail, leaving no room for confusion or doubt. Explicit. That's exactly the word that I want for this presentation. But I have to think about other contexts and other contexts for that word that might raise eyebrows. And so I asked myself, is it worth using the word if it can be understood differently? And I also asked, do I have to point this out to my audience? Well, I obviously answered yes, I need to point it out to my audience because I'm doing it. But as soon as I asked that question, do I have to point this out to my audience? I had the thought, yeah, this is a perfect word to use in this presentation because it is an example of the thought process that goes into the beginning of a strategic communication. I'm thinking about the words I'm using and what they might mean outside of the initial context. That is looking at communication from several different layers. Other layers, messages within the message for any interaction might include the following. Let me give you a kind of a stack here. Within your messages, we can build reputational capital. We can promote things like I did earlier with the off the shelf for next month for our fast track to leadership stuff. We can promote things. We can also reinforce our mission and vision. We can advocate for things. And finally, we can fight miscommunication. Or if we need to do some damage control, we can do that with all of our messages. There is real estate and there is space in any message to not only get to that explicit message, but also to accomplish other things. That's the strategic mindset that we're talking about. Lottie Svalgaard, she wrote a book called The Elephant in the Room. She addresses the challenge of trying to function in multiple layers. Now, these are not the same layers that we're talking about here for our strategic communication. Her layers are insight and taking action. So similar, we've got the explicit taking action, and then we've got the insight, which is kind of the meta materials. She says, how do we overcome the gap between insight and action? How do we make sure that new knowledge is translated and converted into behavior that makes a discernible difference and which will be felt, seen, and heard in an organizational context? She realized that when trying to bridge multiple layers, you have to find a reflective space. You have to be able to kind of step out and think about it from a 50,000-foot view or from a third-party perspective. She refers to this idea as finding a little safe space to kind of observe, where you slip in and out while you're acting. The simultaneous movement back and forth between action and process She calls it double awareness, being aware of two things at once. Other authors, Harold Bridger, for example, refers to this as the double task. And for him, double task means we've got the action and then we've got the process. In our case, it would be the explicit message and the implicit messages that we're sending. So it's a double task. We're looking to do two things at once, maybe three things at once, and it can get a little bit confusing. But if we are intentional about it and we apply a framework, we can accomplish some things. We can build our reputational capital. We can promote things. We can do some damage control in ways that are not explicit and that can help us along. Okay, so to illustrate this, I went back into my personal emails that I had sent over the last little while, and I found this one. It's not a good example of what we're talking about here, but I needed to find a real message that had an explicit goal, had some subtext, and then had a hidden agenda. And this is an email that does all three of those things. This went out on October 7th, about 2 days before the event that is described in the email. Let me give you a little bit of context, then we're going to read the email together. This email went to some people who were signed up for an empowerment class that I was leading. And when they first signed up for the empowerment class, this would have been months and months ago, it was scheduled to be at the TSOB, the Taylorsville State Office Building. The room that we were scheduled in was a little small, and we had a few more people coming than that room could accommodate. So we were graciously lent a room in the Cal Rampton building. UDOT hooked us up with that, and so we changed it on the appointment. It went out, and people kind of probably saw that, but I wanted to make sure that they knew where they were going. And so I also had some other things I wanted to address. So here's the email. The empowerment class scheduled for the morning of October 9th will be held at the Cal Rampton building, gave the address, which is just south of the TSOB. We will be in the Redwood A room. Enter through the main doors on the west side of the building. You will need to show a picture ID to check in at security. See you there. Okay, so there's a couple things I'm trying to do here. First of all, I just want to make sure that they know that we're not meeting at the TSOB. We need to go to a completely different building. But I didn't want to introduce too much difficulty into this message. I didn't want it to look like it was going to be hard to do, because I think as soon as it's hard to do, people don't tend to do it, right? And there's no real consequence for not showing. I shouldn't say this out loud, but there's no real consequence for not showing up to one of our trainings you've signed up for the LEAD program. All right, so a couple other things that I'm thinking about. Notice that I put which is just south of the TSOB. I am tying the new location to the old location to make it seem like, oh yeah, marginal, just that's a hop, skip, and a jump from where you were planning to go anyway. I also was worried about introducing this new difficulty of having to show picture ID at the door. I was worried about that. That's a new difficulty. It sounds like a pain. I don't want to get my driver's license out, but I needed to let them know that that was happening. You'll also notice that I say which room we're in, but I don't give any directions to get to that room. That room's not the easiest to find. You have to go all the way through the atrium, through a set of doors into the learning center, and to the right, and then you find it. I could have helped them with that, but I didn't want to add that difficulty to this message. I left it out on purpose, knowing that they could find it when they get there. But the idea is that I just wanted to keep it as simple as possible, make the change, and get people there. I'm worried a little bit about, in this message, I'm worried that our audience won't show up. And in fact, not everybody did come, but we did get a good enough audience to have a good discussion that day. I also put in the hopeful, see you there. Okay, so there's an example of a message that has a lot of layers. A lot of things are going on there, some of it explicit and some of it implicit. And I don't know that I did a good job here. I don't know that this is the best strategic communication that's ever been written. It probably isn't. Let's take a look at when we're thinking of coming up with a purpose. 3 things to think about. Okay, so the first one, we're going to ask ourselves, what do I want the audience with a capital A, so I guess serious audience, what we want them to think, feel, or do after this communication. We want to know the audience's needs and interests. So our message, our purpose is going to be audience centric. We're going to think about what we can provide for the audience. In order to do that, we have to know the audience. We have to know their needs. We have to know their interests. We have to know what they know about this. We have to know what they hope to take away from this. The second thing we're going to think about is being efficient. We're going to be as concise and direct as we can. In business writing, that's the key. That's our priority, to be concise and direct. We're going to make it as simple as possible. It's going to save people time. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to demonstrate effectiveness. We're going to show how this might help the audience. This is how easy it is to get this result from this thing. And we're going to show them that it's simple and it will happen for them. So those are the three things we want to think about when we're crafting a purpose. Now let's look at the framework. The framework that we're building here is pretty simple. It's really just three things. I'm going to just bring them up right now. That's analyze, organize, and exercise. They rhyme so you can remember them, but let me tell you what they actually mean. So for the analyze piece, this is where we're going to gather data. We're going to go out and get information. So if we're crafting some sort of message, we need to go find out what the audience knows about it. We need to go find out what we need to understand about it ourselves, where our gaps are. So we're going to go gather data, and data can be gathered in many ways. It's kind of all around us at any given time. We're going to look for trends. We're going to just observe and pay attention to what we see. We're going to get relevant numbers if they're out there. We're going to get survey results if we need to, if they're out there. We're going to have conversations with people. We're going to interact with people. But most importantly, as we do this is stuff we're going to be doing probably anyway, right? As we're doing that, we're going to pay attention to keep it in context. We're going to pay attention. We're going to make note of things that we notice. We're going to review these things, and we're going to really get to know and understand what the results of this data gathering are. We're going to understand the data. We're going to know it and know what it means. Once we've kind of got the data and we have a handle on it, we understand it, we know what we need to know about this particular topic, then we're going to start organizing that data. And that will help inform the messages that we craft. And it will help us prioritize those messages. Prioritization is the most important step in organizing. Figuring out what the biggest bang for your buck is. This message needs to go to this audience, and how do I get it to them? What's the best way? What's my best channel to deliver this message? What's my biggest bang for my buck? You need to know what you'll get from each of your channels. As you've built these communication channels, you should understand what they do for you. What does an email do for you? What does, oh, thank you, Nikki, for correcting my spelling there. I wrote this late last night. Anyway, it's fun to do a communication thing and then get that kind of thinking. Anyway, moving on. So we're looking for what our channels can do for us. We're going to build agendas that really do lay out where we're going. So for most communications, we're going to have a couple of things we want to talk about. 1, 2, 3 items, and we'll use that to help organize the message itself. That first item will be a heading, and then we'll write that message, and then the second item will be a heading, and we'll write that message. And what that does for us is it lets people find the things that they need, whatever they need. We're going to simplify complexities for large audiences. So if things are particularly complex, we'll try to simplify that for large audiences, but we will embrace complexity and swim in it with the right group. So when we have complex things to deal with, we'll bring in the right people and we'll really get into it. We'll need to know what we want from the audience and organize accordingly, but we also want to know what the audience wants from us. And we're going to deliver that first. Our priority is to give the audience what they want first. All right, and then we're going to do the exercise, which means that we'll craft the message, we'll build it with the framework that we've built with the analysis and organization, and we'll get right to the point. We'll employ strategy to prepare our audience for future interactions. We'll also engage the audience, build connections, create communication channels, and use those channels for more than just transactional purposes. In other words, those channels that we're going to open up for our audience, we're going to try to make sure that communication and information is flowing through them all the time, not just transactional stuff. We're not just going to employ our channels when we need something. So that takes work, takes lots of work, and it takes a couple sets of eyes, you know. So we should be thinking about that. Who can we bring into this process? Who are the stakeholders that need to be here? That's the framework, even with the typo or even with the misspelling. All right, so let's take a look at some principles. This is more the micro. So the framework is macro. This is a little bit more micro. There's a couple of things that we can do to really make sure that our messages are digestible by our audience. First thing is just employing clarity. And there's a few ways that we can do this. The first thing is we just need to simplify our writing. And there's a couple of things we can do that are really easy that help simplify writing. In business writing, we tend to want simplified messages. We want things that are really easy to digest for our audience, mostly because we're looking to make things efficient. One thing that we can do whenever you're crafting a sentence, think about, first of all, what needs to be done, and that will inform action. Then ask yourself who needs to do it. That will inform who the actor is. So we've got actor and action, and then ask ourselves, okay, what else do we need to know about that? So actor, action, what else? When we do it that way, we have created an active voice sentence that is really simple and really easy to get the information from. Actor, action, what else? In grammar, we would call it subject, verb, and complement. But the idea is that our sentences ought to be loaded that way so that people can find that information really quickly. You read through a sentence like that, you know exactly who is doing what and why. And that will just naturally kind of keep things short. We also ought to think about keeping our paragraphs short. You have about, on a full page document, just a regular piece of paper, you have about 6 lines before your paragraph starts to look too daunting to read. So keep it to 6 lines. If you're doing 2 columns, then you can maybe double that. But the idea is that when we've got these big blocks of writing, people tend to ignore them. So so we want to keep it short, want to keep it paced. We're going to use executive summaries for the same reason. If we've got a lot of information that we're sending out, put it into a document, Google Doc or a Word doc, and add it as an attachment or a link to the whatever message you're sending out. And in that message, you're going to quickly summarize what's in the report. And people can go find that information. Now, make sure that we're designing the report in such a way that it's digestible, easy to read, looks friendly to engage with. But for longer messages, make them attachments. People will not engage with a really long email. Or if they do, they will miss things that are in really long emails, especially if they appear to be big blocks of gray matter. And then the last thing there is we want to contextualize our messages, make sure that they are in proper context. Here's a story that kind of helps understand how this works. A pilot back in the 1950s told a story about an accident on an early morning flight. As the aircraft accelerated to take off, the captain noticed his flight engineer's sullen expression. The flight engineer was looking sad, I guess, and called out, "Cheer up, George." But in his sleepy state, George, the engineer, heard, "Gear up, George," and he dutifully raised the landing gear. Now, this was premature because they were not quite airborne yet. And so the aircraft sank down onto the fuselage and slid to a halt, causing a whole lot of damage. Luckily, nobody was hurt. But the story illustrates an important point. Miscommunication and misunderstanding are both much more likely when context is unclear or not shared. Make sure you're sharing context. Had George known that the topic of conversation was his mood rather than flying a plane, I mean, they were taking off. He was thinking, we're flying a plane here. He probably wouldn't have misunderstood, and most likely would have not acted the way he did. Now, context is something that we get to provide for our audience. And we'll have a few examples in a minute that might help with this. The next thing we want to think about is audience analysis. We need to know who they are and what they know. So we're going to learn our audience's preferences, their quirks, their concerns, their interests. We're going to craft our message to address those, either explicitly or implicitly. So we're going to address our audience's preferences. We're going to address their interests. We're going to address their concerns. We're especially going to address their concerns. If an audience has a concern and we know they have that concern, we need to address that concern in order to get them where we need them to be. We'll craft our message to express those either explicitly, straight ahead, directly, or we can bake them in those other layers, those implicit layers. We're also going to draw a clear connection between our request, whatever it is we're trying to get people to do. And in professional writing, we're doing a lot of requesting. We're asking for labor, effort, money. There's lots of things we're asking for. In fact, almost every message has some sort of an ask. So we're going to tie that request that we're making to a benefit that they get. Whether that is, did everybody catch that? Our interpreters have changed. Teresa Donaldson is the new interpreter there. We're going to make sure that they know how the request benefits them. It's not going to be just us that are getting benefit from it. Now, Warren Buffett, who I used to work for Berkshire Hathaway. Well, I worked for a company owned by Berkshire Hathaway, and so I paid attention to Warren Buffett for a while there. When he would write his annual report, he imagines that he's explaining it to his sisters. So his technical writing that can be really complex, the content that he's putting together, he thinks of it in terms of how would my sisters understand and interpret this. The mental picture keeps his language accessible, keeps it sincere, and it creates something that is accessible to a wide audience, which he wanted to do. Sometimes our audiences are nice and narrow, and we can really get into jargon and we can talk shop. But for the most part, especially as state leaders, our messages often are to more than one audience, right? Sometimes the audience is the secondary audience is whoever comes and grandma requests all of our messages, so there's always a secondary audience to think about as a state employee. David Locke, who does the play-by-play for the Utah Jazz, he talks about how whenever he's calling a game, he will think of a specific person and he will call that game to that specific person. And what he claims is that helps him tell the story better. It helps him keep it a little more intimate, and it makes for a better result for his audience, his overall audience, when he thinks about a specific person to talk to. That is something that we can do as well. We can, whenever we know something about the audience, if we can pick out a person or a smaller group to write towards, it can really help and inform us. You keep it nice and strategic. All right, and the next principle here is the power of story. Now, Dan Chase, back in April of this year, April 2025, did an off-the-shelf on crafting stories. And if you want to further engage in this, I would highly recommend you go back and take a look at that off-the-shelf. April 2025, Dan Chase's off-the-shelf. Look, once again, I promoted something as part of another message. Let's talk about a couple of models that will help us as we craft stories. Okay, the first one is Marshall Gantt's public narrative. Gantz is he's an activist and a Harvard professor who studied the difference between speakers who spoke at their audience and speakers who moved their audience to action. And he found that there was a model that you can use to kind of move people toward action. The model is pretty simple. It's tell the story of yourself, tell the story of the group, and then tell the story of now, which means put it in context for what they need to do now. In other words, start with yourself. This is what I did and how it affected me. And then the story of us is, this is how it could affect all of us in this group. And then the story of now is, let's go do something right now to make it happen. And that's pretty effective when you have an audience that's right there with you, that's ready to act. But if you've got an audience that you're trying to convince of something and that something benefits you, starting with a story about yourself is maybe not the best idea. We can still use the idea of micro, macro, and then meaning, which is basically what we were talking about: the story of us, the story of, I'm sorry, the story of you, the story of us, and the story of now. That's micro, macro, and meaning. But we probably shouldn't start with a story about ourselves. What you can do is start with a story about someone else who was affected by the thing that you're asking for. Someone else who had a breakthrough or got something out of that. So instead of starting with the story of ourselves, we're going to start with the story of someone else, an individual, and then we will talk about context for the whole group, what it looks like for everybody, and then we're going to say, okay, and this is our shared purpose. Let's go do something about it right now. And that's when we'd give our call to action. Another thing we can use is metaphor. Metaphor is, story is a little bit hard, right? Story is difficult because we have to think about a lot of things when we're crafting stories. We have to think about characters. We have to think about plot. We have to think about setting. We have to think about conflict. We have to think about resolution. All of these elements, they contribute to how they contribute to a compelling narrative. We got to think about all of that. So telling stories is a little harder, takes a little bit more time, a little bit more real estate to do. We can skip a lot of that if we use metaphor. Metaphor is, they're based on principles of storytelling, but they take less time to explain. They develop a little quicker than a full narrative. Metaphor can act as a shortcut bridge, getting people across the chasm of complexity to clarity a lot faster. Let's try one, right? Let me just throw out a metaphor and you start to think about what that metaphor might look like. You don't have to put anything in the chat or say anything. Just let's make it a thought exercise. But here's the metaphor. An excellent communicator is a gardener. Why? Why might an excellent communicator be a gardener? Think about that for a second. Okay, well, some things are starting to occur to me. Communicators must understand the soil, which is, I don't know, the workplace or the market or whatever. Communicators need to know about the climate, which might be social trends or the culture of the office. Julie Johnson says, we plant the seed, we take care of the message, and we return to nurture it, cultivating the soil, removing the weeds. Love it. That's great. A gardener might need to think about the special needs of each plant, right? So we're going to have to tailor things to a specific audience. Great. I love the Max Johnson brought up the idea of removing weeds. My dad was a gardener, and he used to say, if it's not what you want, where you want it, it's a weed. And that really that works for me really well as a metaphor for life, right? If it's not what you want, where you want it, it's a weed. He was addressing specifically like volunteer plants that come up, and you're like, oh man, that's a great plant to have a tomato right there in the middle of the lawn. He's like, that's a weed. That's not what we want, where we want it. That's a weed. Okay, so that's the idea here. We can employ metaphor, and we can get to the effects of story a little quicker than building up an entire what it would take to build a story. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't use stories. Yeah, we definitely should use stories. We should be story collectors, especially if we're thinking strategically. We should be collecting stories all the time and then using them strategically to bring people along with us. But metaphors are also a very powerful way of getting to that same result. All right, let's talk about mindsets for a second here, and how shifting our mindset will really help us kind of get in the right space for being strategic communicators. Again, strategic communication is about that explicit layer and then all the other layers that we can throw into our messages. We can help people understand what we do. We can help people feel good about what they're doing. There's lots of things we can do with our implicit messages. Okay, that first mindset is this one. We're going to go from an information mindset where we just share information to an inspired mindset. In other words, we're going to stop thinking about our communications as just informing people. We're going to start thinking about our communications as inspiring people, which means we're going to move people to action. We're going to craft our messages in such a way that moves people to action. Here's some examples. We have our inform side there and our inspire side there. I'm going to read through these. They're basically the same message to the same community, but from a different perspective. First one, a new community garden plot available. We are pleased to announce that the City Council has approved the new community garden space behind the Recreation Center. Plots are now available for registration. There are 25 plots, each measuring 4 by 8. Registration opens on Monday, April 15th at 9 a.m. and is $35 per plot for the season. Please visit the Parks Department website, download and submit the required form. All applications will be processed the order they receive. All right. We know what we need to know about that program. We know everything we need to know. Let's see what it looks like to try to inspire people with a message. Subject, cultivate community. Join the new garden project. We are pleased to announce that the City Council has approved an initiative to transform the unused space behind the Recreation Center into a vibrant, living tapestry where neighbors connect and food grows. This is more than a garden. It's a chance to roll up your sleeves, teach a child about nature, and invest directly in the health and beauty of our neighborhood. Registration for one of the 25 available plots opens on Monday, April 15th, and we invite you to claim your piece of earth and join us in growing something truly special this year. I'm in. Notice they didn't even tell us what the cost is on that one. They're like, they're going to come. They are going to come. But you kind of feel the difference, right? We're looking at inspiring people and moving them to action. The first one's great for everybody that is like really invested in gardening. The second one brings along kind of a newer audience, people that are wanting to connect with their children or wanting to connect with others in the community or wanting to help grow food. It's inspiring, right? So we're going to take the opportunity to shift our mindset from we're just informing people to we're going to move people to action. We're going to think about what we do in our messages and we're going to move people to action. All right, the next mindset that we want to think about is going from being a talker to being a listener. And this is really, we're not talking about people who talk a lot. We're not talking about people who don't listen well. What we're actually talking about is the dissemination and the collection of information. We're going to start to prioritize the collection of information over the dissemination of the information we want to put out. It's just a little bit, it's better for us to think more about collecting information than it is about always disseminating information. So let's talk about this for a second. I've got a couple of lists that we can look at. Now, we're never going to say that we should stop talking altogether. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that we're going to prioritize collecting information over disseminating information. Okay. All right. So for talking, what we're trying to do is we're going to share our perspectives. We're going to turn thoughts into collective knowledge. We're going to empower others with context and confidence to act decisively. That's great. We need to do all of that. That needs to stay in our tool belt for sure. But here's what we're going to do with our listening. We're going to build trust with the people we're listening to. We're going to gain understanding from them. We're going to connect deeply. We're going to gather critical and crucial intelligence. We're going to validate team members, and we'll be prepared to create messages with maximum impact. So we're just going to prioritize a little bit listening over talking. But we're going to do both. Where is my cursor? There we go. All right, one more mindset to shift here. We need to switch our mindset from thinking about one-off messages, all of our messages being one-offs, and then shifting to the idea that all of our messages are connected through a consistent narrative. And let me show you a couple of examples here. Bring them both up. All right, these are basically the same message, but let's see how they're different. Mandatory new performance review system rollout. Dear employees, effective immediately, the agency is switching to a new performance review system, replacing UPM. This change is being made in part to meet the state's updated performance management requirements. All managers must attend a 2-hour training session on the new software. Your 2025 performance goals are due to be entered into the new digital platform by October 31st. Failure to meet this deadline will result in a compliance issue noted by HR. Okay, we know what we need to do. We have our marching orders, and we most likely will just do it, right? Because we need to. The other one, commitment to excellence, launching Vantage. Team, our mission to serve the people of Utah demands that we continuously improve. This year, we are evolving our performance management approach from a quarterly review to a continuous dialogue for growth. This strategic shift is part of our agency-wide commitment to excellence initiative to ensure every role is supported, recognized, and aligned with state goals. The new Vantage system, a tool to support this new mindset, will enable more frequent conversation focused on your development and growth, not just compliance. Please review the attached schedules for training. Your participation is direct investment in your professional journey and our collective success. Okay, if I'm being really honest, which of those two emails gets more compliance? Probably the first one, the one that is focused on compliance. Which one gets better overall outcomes? Probably the second one. Mostly because the second one tells us that this is about us and what we're going to get out of this system. The first one tells us, you got to do this. Now, there's nothing wrong with telling someone they have to do something when they have to do it, right? We want to be explicit in our messages. We want to give people what we're not going to beat around the bush, especially when we're talking about feedback. Feedback is never subtext. You have to be explicit with feedback. You never rely on subtext for feedback. But if we're trying to get people to buy into this new program and see it as a development opportunity, the second message is a much better way of doing that. I should acknowledge Adam's comment here from our Inform Inspire messages. He doesn't like that they left the price of the second example out, and I can see where he's coming from there. We probably should leave the cost in there, or at least make it very, very easy to find what the cost is, because yeah, you might think that we're hiding something that way when we're only trying to inspire, right? So the cost is fine, leave it in. Okay. Communication works for those who work at it. It is effort. It's keeping us from going into bending towards entropy, keeps us at the status quo, and pushes us, if we add a little strategy, pushes us into growth and improvement. That is what we're hoping to do. Hopefully, we'll start to think in layers. Remember, you've got your explicit messages and then all of the implicit messages that you can add to any communication that you're doing. Hopefully, we'll follow that framework where we're going to do some analysis, and we're going to spell analysis wrong, and then we're going to do some organizing, and then we're also going to do some exercise. We're going to actually implement what we learned from the analysis and the organization, and then we're going to try to shift our mindsets to be inspirational. We're going to listen more than we talk, and we're going to employ consistent narratives over all of our communication channels. If we do those three things, we'll start to be strategic communicators, and we'll have some powerful tools. All right. Thank you for your time, your attention. Don't forget, next month, December 3rd, 2025, 10 a.m. Go see Sydney. She'll present on Recognition is Retention. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for your time, your attention. We'll hopefully see you soon.